What is that sound?
What's it look like? I'm trying to cook this block of tofu. I've been at this since 4 a.m, James. Show some respect for the chef.
Jeez, sorry. Wait, are you trying to cook the tofu by slapping it, therefore transferring kinetic energy into thermal energy to raise the temperature of the surface of the tofu to get a light sear?
Yeah, I am actually.
Yeah, I'm starting to be able to predict these shenanigans a bit more now. But look, slapping it's not going to do. We need more power. Have you tried kicking it? More kinetic energy equals more thermal energy.
No, but I like that thought. Here, hold this like those American football players at the tip of your finger, and I'll take a run up and boot this thing into a lovely meal.
Yeah, but we can go bigger than this.
Bigger?
Bigger. What if I hit it with my car?
I think we can go bigger than that.
Have you seen the new Fallout TV show yet?
No.
I have an idea.
Nuclear tofu cooking sequence engaged.
Fusion core activated. Tofu primed. Detonation. 3, 2, 1. I reckon that would come out quite nice, actually.
I don't know. I've got a sneaking suspicion it might burn, but
I don't know. I mean, it depends how far away from the reaction the tofu was. I watched this really interesting video from Kyle Hill on like nuclear blast zones and like
he loves nuclear stuff. Yeah.
How close you can be to a nuclear explosion to be like okay.
Yeah.
The answer is really fucking far away.
Yep, that checks out. Welcome to the Get Commanded podcast. It's the GCP brought to you by POG, Palms Off Gaming, sponsor of this podcast, where Australopithecus afarensis is locked in the past where it belongs. I'm your host, Walt.
Hello, Commander players. I'm just a little guy at 6'1", James.
Just a little dude.
These are getting more unhinged, man. I like how at the start of this year we were like, let's throw something new in.
Yeah.
It's just gotten...
Just a little bit weird, you know, mostly normal.
People like the skits. Yeah. It'll be fine.
Look, before we get to the transmission, if you're listening to the stuff that we make and you like the content that we make and you want to support us even more than you already are by listening, and you want to support us lots more than you already are by listening, you can support us over on Patreon.
Yeah, best way to support the podcast is directly, and you get a bunch of really cool perks. We've been playing a lot more games with our patrons recently. We've been building decks for our patrons recently. We've even been doing that live on stream, so if you want to see your Moxfield list go up on our Twitch stream, you're more than welcome to sign up. There's a bunch of really good perks, but yeah, if you want Walt and I to make more content, we're actually in the conversation with a video editor at the moment.
Yeah.
All of this stuff does unfortunately cost money and time for other people. So yeah, if you want to see it all happen, go to patreon.com/getcommanderpodcast to support the show. Definitely.
And of course, we mentioned it in the last podcast episode, but Theo's GoFundMe is still live if you'd like to support their gender affirming care. The link to that one will be in... I'll chuck in the show notes for this one as well. Why not?
Yeah, may as well.
Even if you can't donate, just share the link around. It makes a huge difference, and we love Theo, obviously.
Yes, that makes this podcast look really cool. Now you can help them look really cool by getting their surgery.
Seamless.
That was a brilliant promotion. That was awesome. Didn't plan that whatsoever.
Nah, he's good off script, this guy. He's just a little guy at 6'1". We've got an incoming transmission from the deep depths of the galaxy, from the Space Commanders. It's time to get commanded.
The numbered power level scale is redundant, but players continue to have strong preferences and must be guided if they wish to trek towards the penultimate peak.
The penultimate peak.
So for those who didn't, read lots when they were tiny little boys like me,
just didn't have a dictionary on their bedside table.
Like little boys like me.
Said 6 foot 1.
Yeah, that's it. I'm not 6'1", I wish. Penultimate, this is the second highest.
Yes.
So they're not talking about cEDH. We're trekking towards power, that's what they said. But not cEDH, because they're talking
penultimate.
about the second highest peak. So I reckon they're talking about high-powered.
But high-powered casual.
Yes.
Because, I think that there's a real big distinction in, cEDH and casual. And I think we'll talk about this in a second, but this is different for us. This is, actually going out of our way, because in the past, we've generally pointed towards people away from the higher-powered cards to go for more fun in their decks with we've talked about removing tutors for more card draw and talking about including weirder synergies over the objectively best choice.
Yeah, I mean, we straight up had an episode called Good Cards Are Holding You Back. So,
yeah, that's true. Think of this as the anti that episode.
It makes sense. This is a part of the power level scale that a lot of people in our personal play group play a lot in. I have a lot to learn from this area of the power level scale. I would say this is the most notable absence in the scale of my decks. It kind of goes very low powered, mid-ish powered, mid-ish high, and then cEDH. There's just nothing between that sort of mid-ish high to cEDH. I don't have a lot of decks in this area, so I think you'll have to steer this one.
I can do that. I feel like I definitely play at this level more. I mean, there's a play group of people that we play with that love this kind of area of the power scale, and I play with them quite a lot.
You play with them more than I do, I would say, as well. Yeah,
they'll be on our stream on Monday though, so have fun.
So there you go. So yeah, I guess we're cranking up the power. So you can consider this the antidote to card draw versus tutors and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But we know that a lot of people play in this power level. Look, it's a very interactive place to play. There's slightly faster games than
you also see
cEDH.
a lot more like expensive and powerful cards, both monetary value.
Yeah, so if
the mythic rare icon comes up a lot.
If you're someone who just has a large collection of cards and you want to build a super synergized deck, you just may be capable of building a deck like this anyway. And we'll probably give you the tips, I imagine, for building.
Or I think this is good if you've been playing pre-con level commander for ages and you've upped the power level a little bit, but you want to brew an actual powerful commander and your play group is wanting these kinds of games. This is your episode.
I feel like this is the main person who'll benefit from this is someone who knows a lot of people who play at this power level but isn't playing much of it yet.
And wants to sit in that table.
Yeah, you want to sit at that table, then this is sort of what you can look to, I reckon. Yeah.
All right. Well, we should probably start with identifying specifically what we're looking for here. And I think one of the best things that we could do is identify what we're not looking for, which is what I alluded to earlier, which was cEDH.
The ultimate peak, you would say.
That is not the penultimate, the one before. This is the ultimate. You can't get any more powerful than cEDH unless you're paying a homebrew no bans cEDH.
Yeah.
That's about as high as you can go.
For sure. So there's going to be some pretty key differences between what we're looking for in high-powered casual versus the very specific values of cEDH that we've outlined a couple of times, especially in the semi-recent episode. What do we call it? Getting into cEDH. We spoke about it at length there. But yes, cEDH has a meta, right?
Yes.
A whole meta game. There are deck lists. There's a database of this is the meta game.
Which is managed by a committee of experts that identify what is in and what is almost in the meta, because fringe cEDH decks do exist. For example, I've got a Slimefoot and Squee cEDH deck, and that's not a database deck, but it can still exist in cEDH because it's doing the things that cEDH does and it's competing at those pods. So I think that one of the key things that cEDH decks do that high-powered casual decks won't do is they will majorly affect the game as early as turn 1. They will really start putting game-winning pieces or an engine or a huge threat as early as turn 1, 2, 3. I think for high-powered casual, we're going to start affecting the game by turns 3 to 4.
Yeah.
We're probably still doing the very typical thing of playing 2-mana rocks on turns 2.
We're not so much in the fast mana camp, right? cEDH is almost exclusively fast mana.
I think fast mana is okay in high powered,
I think
for
it's
a few
there,
things.
But I think that you see probably an equal or maybe even slightly higher percentage of your ramp just being, rocks and just ramp
good
spells.
land spells.
But whereas I think in cEDH you would say mostly fast mana mana, some amount of rocks, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, if it's sort of 70% to 30%, I reckon you flip it around for high-powered casual, I would
Exactly.
say.
Look, I mean, your deck still might be able to put a threat down turn 2 if it's got a cracked hand or like just like a really explosive play.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like a ritual spell or something.
Or even, like, you're probably a deck that's going to play like an Esper Sentinel, for instance. Like that
playing
is
that turn 1 will do stuff.
That will feel really, really great. And cEDH decks will do that as well, but you're not like dumping your hand, I would say, the way that a lot of cEDH decks will on turn 1 and 2.
Yeah, the other thing for me that cEDH specifically, I mean, if you go to the cEDH.guide website, this is one of the first things that they list. They say cEDH allows all strategies.
Yeah, right.
We're still in casual.
Yes.
And we still care about the enjoyment of the game for all players at the pod.
Yeah, we're not sort of sitting down, like, I mean, we've talked before about how with cEDH, you don't really need a rule zero conversation outside of, this is how much experience I have, and this is who I am, and whatever.
Yeah.
Like, mostly...
This is my commander.
This is my commander, yeah. This is how my commander works, maybe, is something you outline in cEDH, but you don't say, this is how my deck wins, by the way, there's some stacks pieces in there. You're just like, I'm playing Yashan stacks, and everyone has to deal with that.
If you're playing, like, tournament cEDH, you go, my name's James, commander.
Yep, and that's all you have to give at the
yeah.
time, for sure. But I guess if you're in casual, we're still having a rule zero conversation, which means that if you are going to play like a stacks deck, you need to be really clear with your pod, and you need to make sure your pod are okay with you playing stacks.
Yeah, we'll talk about rule zero later on in this episode for sure, because we're still in casual, so it's still important.
Yeah.
But another thing that cEDH does in terms of deck building, and this is a key thing for us because we're going to start off building a high-powered deck, is cEDH only includes cards that increase its power in both consistency and efficiency.
You never no one has a pet card in cEDH.
No.
I mean, you might, but it might be like ad nauseum.
Yeah. Ad nauseum. I remember when this goofy card was bad. But yeah, like in high-powered casual, we are trying to walk a fine line. We're trying not to overstep it. So we still probably will tinker with our decks and maybe downpower it after the fact.
Sure.
So like, for example, cEDH, I've never ever heard someone go, oh, this deck is just too mean. I need to downpower it.
Maybe I'll cut this rule of law. It seems like it's resulting in a really miserable game for everybody.
Said no tournament winning ever. But like with high-powered casual, we might end up building. I'm basically saying don't be afraid to downpower a high-powered casual deck.
Yes. We're still walking a line. And so we're using the word high-powered casual because, I mean, we've spoken before. We don't like the power level scale, like the numbered power level scale, obviously.
Yeah.
And the Space Commanders don't either, as they said at the top of this episode.
We're not going to give a number here.
No, we're not going to give a number. But
stick to our values.
We're sticking to our values. But I am saying that I think the one downside that we get when we start using these terms like high-powered casual is we are describing still a band of possible powers.
Yes.
So just because you build like with all the things that we outline here doesn't mean that your deck will match the high-powered decks that your friends are playing. And so you might need to upgrade, you might need to downgrade still to match the people around you because again, we're not playing cEDH. We're not just building a great deck and going, that's my deck. We're still building within our play group and within the people that we play with.
Yeah, and I'd call it a balancing act. That's imagine you're walking a tightrope. But let's dive into building a high-powered casual deck. It's funny. I feel like when you're building... Okay. The advice that I'm going to go for here with our listeners is what advice we've given in the past to ignore. I think that's a good way of going about it. Because, realistically, at the top of your mind when you are building a high-powered casual deck is consistency and efficiency.
Yes.
That's what you're really chasing. That's, if anything, all power level discussions come down to those two words.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about, our Rule Zero template.
It's the whole second question.
It's the whole second question.
How is your deck consistent?
I mean, even the efficiency is talking about the win cons. We'll talk about that in a second. But I think the thing to highlight here again is that we'll be playing some really well-known cards and staple cards. And this is something that this podcast has really tried to avoid doing a lot. Yeah. Talking about let's rank the best card drawer in Commander. What do you think of Ristic Study, Walt?
Yeah.
Is it good? Let's talk about this. It's almost like no one's discussed this before.
Yeah. Look, I think that I think I'm a big part of this in driving this in terms of the get commanded message. I find staples quite boring in general when I'm building decks. And so I'm often, the one on the podcast being like, hey, rather than play that staple, I mean, I have a whole fucking stream of things called Thrifty Thursdays where I talk about
actively
weird,
not
goofy,
staples.
Weird, goofy cards you haven't heard of and how you could play them instead. So yeah, like I do enjoy the sort of variance and the different things we've outlined here. But yeah, the staples are staples for a reason. I mean, on the Q&A, when someone asks, like, do you know of any cards that are niche or less played that are better than current staples? And I was just like, straight up, like,
the staples are staples for a reason.
Yeah, you can't get more efficient than Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile, and that's why they're the most played removal spells in our format.
Correct. And I think that we are going to need to accept that, it's going to be really hard for us to build really efficient, high-powered casual decks without using some of these staples.
Oh, I don't know that it's possible, yeah.
Well, we are still going to be able to use other cards that support our theme or whatever.
Yeah.
But, when we're looking for removal spells, we're probably going to be looking for Swords to Plowshares if we're in white. But, like, I want to outline that a lot of people probably are listening to this and going, I only build Vorthos in Commander, so I'm going to tune out now.
Yeah.
Don't, because you can still build Vorthos in high-powered casual. And the one that I'm thinking about one of your decks specifically, Walt, is your Seguin deck.
Yeah.
Your Seguin deck is all about knights and swords.
Yep.
Now, you've specifically gone about that in building at a certain power level and kind of like that mid kind of power level of casual. But you could easily keep it on theme and make it more powerful by including Sword of Feast and Famine, Sword of Fire and Ice.
I wouldn't say easily.
Finances are a tricky thing. Yeah.
But yes, I see what you mean. Like there are ways to approach deck building where your focus is high power, but you can still have the lens that you had in the first place of Vorthos and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I do think it's going to become harder.
Yes.
Like as it's naturally very
especially
easy.
for more like really niche themes. Like the more niche you get, the more naturally your deck will be downpowered. So like if you want to build a typal deck, your elf typal deck is going to have a lot higher of a ceiling than your Kithkin tribal typal deck.
It's to do with the number of cards you have access to, because Commander casts such a wide net in terms of the cards that we get. The more that you get, the more likely it is you find that those 5-6 cards that are just absolutely busted. So Queen is tough. Like even my deck, I've really tried to build it as efficiently as I possibly can. It is terrible at drawing cards, and I still need to work on it. I'm probably going to put a Phyrexian Arena in there
just to get an extra
because
card
there's a sword in the art.
It's an arena. Knights fight in an arena.
Yeah,
surely.
There you go. That's it.
In ancient Rome, maybe.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, well, look, I think that our Rule Zero template that I was referring to before is like a good place for us to kind of put a goal towards.
Sure.
So, like, if we're answering the questions on our Rule Zero template, which to remind everyone of very quickly again is how does your deck win?
Yep.
How is it consistent? And how does it stop your opponents from winning?
Yep.
I think what we want to be doing is answering it with like stuff that makes people go, oh wow, like that's that kind of level. So we want to be saying it wins like blah blah or a variation of blah blah, and then use the word every time.
Yeah.
Like I've seen it win in this same way every time.
There will be we're streamlining the win cons. It's like there will not be very many of them, but we're going to reach them much more consistently.
Yes. Yeah. And then like the consistency, it's like it's consistent as hell because I run X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Not saying like, oh yeah, it sometimes does the thing if I draw right.
Right.
That's what we're avoiding. We're going for like, I want this deck to be consistent.
Sure.
And then like answering, I can stop others really well because I have this level of interaction.
Sure. So we're shooting for this level of a Rule Zero conversation where if we did sit down with someone who was playing a more casual deck, like a sort of mid-powered, lowish powered deck, and we said these things to them, they would go, I'm going to put this away.
Yeah. My pre-constructed Frodo and Sam deck is not going to sit well at this table.
I'm going to pull out my Urza Lord High Artificer deck instead, I think.
Yeah, my Vorthos Urza deck, because God, any Urza deck is terrifying.
I mean, they're always terrifying. Yeah, but I see what you mean. Like where that's kind of the caliber of Rule Zero that we should be having. It shouldn't be...
That's our end goal.
Yeah. That makes sense.
We want to talk our deck up, and I think that there's There's a couple of things that we've suggested on this podcast before that I'm going to say almost go exactly opposite.
Yeah.
And the first one that I'm thinking of here is randomness. We've said before that randomness in your deck can create a very fun aspect to the game.
Well, I think we used the word variance.
Variance,
was
yeah.
how we described it. But yeah, we were like, you can find some amount of fun when you're moving away from things always doing the same thing every time. But now we're going the other way, right? We're going, no, I want my deck to do the same thing every time. Random things like Boom Pile.
Boom Pile was the one that I was thinking of almost exclusively from that episode.
So Boom Pile is the 4-mana artifact that you tap and flip a coin. And if you win the flip, you destroy all non-land permanents. If you lose the flip, nothing happens.
4 mana.
Nothing.
I tapped an artifact.
Yeah, 4 mana, nothing.
Look, if you're chasing that kind of random funness in your deck, you're probably not going to be able to play high-powered casual.
No.
Because the other decks are just going to outvalue you.
Yeah.
So the really key thing here is if you want to include cards that have randomness in it, you need to leverage it super, super well.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I'm thinking of Eorith, the Healing House. You know that mono blue tap commander where you can tap it to untap a permanent or tap it to untap 2 legendary permanents or something like that.
Oh, wow. No, I don't know that card.
It's great. It's in my Tornos deck.
Oh, right.
But it's a legendary creature, so you could run it as a commander. You could run this untapper commander, which I've not seen anyone brew yet, which I'm really excited to see. But like, even if you were playing that commander and you played Boom Pile to try and like get it again, like tap it. Oh my god, I failed the flip. I'll use my commander to untap, tap it again.
75% chance rather than 50 now, yeah.
But like, it's still a chance.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
sure.
Like, you're still running another 50-50 chance.
I think when you're brewing for high-powered, I think there is room for you to play, maybe slightly goofy or pet cards or synergy cards in the deck. I think your interaction specifically should not be this.
Yeah.
Your interaction needs to be, okay, what are the most played board wipes in my colors? If I'm in white, I'm probably going to be playing Wrath of God. If I'm in blue, if I have the money, I'm probably going to be playing Cyclonic Rift.
Yeah, black Toxic Deluge.
Yeah. I think your answers in high-powered casual need to be extremely efficient, extremely consistent, and those will naturally be the staples of our format for sure.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be random.
No, and they're always going to do the thing unless they're counterspelled.
Yeah.
Speaking of doing the thing, we've talked about this in terms of like all casual levels.
Sure.
But when we're talking about high power, we want to avoid the heck out of big mana do-nothings.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
I'm thinking about cards like Atali Primal Storm or even Plague and Nasari.
Oh, I mean, that is admittedly pretty gas in your 9th Doctor deck.
Yeah.
But it is an upkeep trigger and it is 5 mana. So
And it does nothing when it comes down. For those that don't know, Atali Primal Storm, you should definitely know by now. 6 mana, 6/6. When it attacks, everyone exiles the top card of their library.
You can cast any number of spells without paying the mana cost.
Pretty cool. But again, it's a big 6 mana do nothing because when it enters, it's a 6/6 body that you need to attack with.
Yeah, so you need to give it haste and attack that turn. And if you're not going to give it haste, it needs to survive a full turn cycle where everyone's looking at it and going, oh my god, it's Atali Primal Storm.
100%. And Plague and Nasari is a 5 mana creature that says at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent exiles the top card of their library. An opponent
exiles until they hit a non-land card, I think, with Plague and Nasari.
Yeah, that's right. And then an opponent chooses
one of those
cards. You can't cast that, but you can cast any of the others.
Yes. Or you cast 2 of the others.
2 of the others,
I think you exile as well. Because there's 4 cards that go in the middle. One of them gets put away by one of your opponents, and then you choose 2, so then the other one doesn't get cast either. But yeah, it's gas. Absolutely gas.
It's pretty insane. But like, I'm talking about like leveraging these cards.
Yeah, sure.
So, for example, Obeka Splitter of Seconds is like... I'm not going to use my 9th Doctor deck as an example. I think people will know Obeka a little bit more.
Yeah, this is the new Grixis one. It's like a 2/5 with Menace.
Yep.
When it deals combat damage to a player, you get that many additional upkeeps after this step.
Correct. So in an Obeka deck where your like whole thing is getting Obeka to connect and guaranteeing those upkeeps, you could potentially run Plague and Nasari.
Yeah, sure.
Because you're really going to abuse the absolute heck out of it.
Well, and you might get it that turn too, right?
Yeah.
Like you could play Plague and Nasari. Like let's say you've played Obeka Splitter of Seconds, turn 4 or whatever. Turn 5, you could play Plague and Nasari, go to combat, attack, connect with Obeka, get 2 upkeeps, get 2 of those triggers
Cast
this turn.
4 spells for free.
Yeah, that feels pretty good.
Yeah.
But that's this turn and not waiting a full turn cycle, I think. I think look, I'll say in general that high-powered casual decks need to have a very low curve. We do want to affect the game early. Again, it's not cEDH, it's not dropping stuff on turn 1 necessarily.
You don't want cards in your hand that are like 6-7 mana
No.
and you are only on turn 3.
I think this is the kind of deck, a high-powered casual deck, where you want like maybe 2 or 3 cards in total that cost 6 mana or more.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And they should win you the game.
Oh,
They
yeah.
should be like borderline just guaranteeing it. So like, for example, Atali, I think that's a pretty good line to draw at 6 mana because Atali, does that actually win you the game?
No.
It doesn't. It gets you a lot of value.
Yeah. You need to be looking more towards like, Command the Dreadhorde for your
Yeah.
6 mana slot, or, like something of that caliber, like a huge one-sided wipe or a huge like overrun kind of effect.
Or a huge reanimation spell, or a huge like storm card, like a card that like cascades a bunch, like an Apex Devastator, for example.
Or if you're a Spellslinger deck, maybe that card is Thousand Year Storm.
Yeah.
And that's your top end where it's like, okay, if I get a Thousand Year Storm and I untap, I win.
Yes.
Like I know my deck will
There's
do that.
guarantee no way I lose after this.
Yeah. You need to really consider how much you're paying and then what you're getting from it. And none of these, Atali style stuff.
I mean, even like, okay, you try and think of a commander that might help Atali, like Xenagos. It's still not good enough.
It gives it haste, I think, is the one thing I'll say for Xenagos.
But it doesn't give it trample.
No, it doesn't.
So it's not actually beating for 12 because someone will just chump it.
Yeah, I don't know how high... I guess you could... I don't know how high-powered Xenagos really is. I think you could build it in a way where it would be pretty strong. But it's not doing that much for you. I don't know. I've seen some pretty busted decks out there.
I mean, when you like combine cards like Sneak Attack and drop a card for free or something like that.
Sneak Attack, Terror of the Peaks kind of things, then that's probably true. Yeah.
I don't know, but like for using Atali as that example,
sure,
it is a 6 mana do nothing,
and even then it may not even be good enough. The fact that we weren't sure,
and that's a good piece of advice. If you look at the card and you're thinking about putting it in your high-powered casual deck, and you're going, it's not good enough.
No,
it's not good enough.
It's not the kind of thing, like I think in lower powered decks you can test stuff.
Yeah.
Where you can be like, I'm actually not sure how good this is yet. I need to see it a few times. If you're not sure about something, especially if it costs 5, 6, 7 mana in a high powered casual deck, just don't play it.
Yeah.
It's probably not right.
You probably have other cards in your colors that you could just easily say, yes, this will always be good.
You might have other cards in your deck that you look at and go like, that I'm certain about.
Yeah.
Like your Thousand Year Storm.
Yeah.
Or like your Exquisite Blood or something like, you might look at that and go like, no, that's definitely going in.
That'll definitely stay in the deck because that wins me the game.
For sure.
Look, I think lastly as well, I want to point people away from conditional spells. Look, there are some conditional spells which are super, super fun and like can really always be met in our certain commander decks. However, we want to be ensuring consistency in our high-powered casual deck, and we need to be guaranteeing we meet the conditions for the spells that we want because we don't want dead cards in our hand.
Right. So when you say conditional, you mean like cards that rely upon other cards to be good?
Yes, or a certain board state to be good, or a certain thing to be happening in game.
Yeah. I mean, this I think we've even said to people is in general a good thing to do,
Yeah.
right? Like, consider how many cards in your deck synergize with something before you put it in. But yeah, especially in high-powered casual, there will be cards where it's like, okay, like, yes, this might be good in that even 30, 40% of the time, but it's like, no, your cards need to be good 70 to 80% of the time.
And like, I think, again, the category that we can look at here in our deck building template is our enhancers slot, right? Because a lot of the time we've talked about how enhancers can be a pretty dead card in your hand if the situation isn't right.
Yeah. Maybe high-powered casual decks just don't play many enhancers? I don't know.
Well, I think they can, and they're very specific enhancers for very specific decks.
Right.
I'm thinking about, for example, Panharmonicon. No, not Panharmonicon. That's the double ETB. Doubling Season is the one I was thinking of.
Oh, sure.
In a Planeswalker deck.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, if you have 30 Planeswalkers in your deck, and any number of them, like 20 of them, can ultimate if they are played with a doubling season. Now, so for those who don't know, if you have a doubling season, it doubles the counters that get put on stuff. It's one of the few effects that, because of the way it's worded, will double your Planeswalkers entering loyalty.
Yeah, so if your Planeswalker enters usually with 4 loyalty, doubling season will see it and put 4 additional counters on it and double it to 8.
I think also the new Vorinclex works for this. I say
Correct,
new, it's like
yes.
3 years old now. You
Oh my god, that was Kaldheim.
I know,
wow,
long time ago.
Yeah, that
but
does
also,
work as well.
also
yeah.
works. But yeah, like if you're playing a Planeswalker deck specifically, this means that 20 of your Planeswalkers now ultimate as soon as they come down. It's like, cool, I placed Fairy Master of Time. Oh no, that wouldn't work. You need 10 loyalty on that. What's like, there's like the Venser one. Whenever you cast a spell, exile target permanent.
Yeah.
Like you play that Venser and you're like,
Get
cool,
the
I get an
emblem.
emblem immediately that says whenever I cast things, I exile your permanents. Hectic.
Wild.
That basically says I win the game
Yes,
on it.
and I think that they're the kind of enhancers that we're looking
Sure.
for in our high-powered casual decks. But like even some other conditional spells, I think we'll talk about this a little bit more in the second half, because in the second half of the episode, I want to look at our essentials to deck building. Card draw removal,
Right.
win cons, mana ramp,
Yeah.
all of that kind of stuff. So maybe we can take a bit of a break.
A bit of a break.
Yeah.
A break
A-
from the podcast?
I
You
know.
mean like a thrifty interlude?
You are absolutely right, Walt. Considering we're playing high-powered casual today, you can consider this like a pit stop in one of those Formula One races. So we'll be like in, and it'll be like 4 tires changed,
Wow.
we're fueled up, and then we're ready to go. But before all that, Walt's going to do a weird thing.
You're actually going to be joining me this week for this
Am
one.
I? Exciting.
Yeah, so,
Where are
as
we?
is tradition, I will be performing, but I will be joined by James this week in a dialogue. So, we're going to hear a little something about a thrifty card. Do you want to show everyone the card we'll be featuring this week, James? When I say show,
I do. Here
I
it
mean
is,
describe in words. Here it is.
Here it is.
Look at it. There it is.
See it?
Remember it. Okay.
I will
Put it
note
away.
for listeners
Put
as
it
well.
away. Put it away. Put it away.
I'll note that
No.
we're holding the card up.
No, but
We've
put it
got
away,
the
put it
card
away,
in
put it
our
away, put it
hand.
away.
No, they've got to see it.
No. They've
They
seen it.
can't see-
They've seen it.
Okay.
You've seen it. You've seen it. You
Yeah?
see it.
You know
Yeah,
what it is?
Yeah. Now put it away.
All right.
Is this your card?
Yeah.
Holy okay. We're
That
gonna
was wild.
stop that right now. What are we featuring this week?
We're looking at Soul Shatter this week. For 2 and a black, you get an instant. I'm still giggling.
Yep.
You get it for 2 and a black. You get an instant. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker with the highest mana value among creatures and planeswalkers they control.
And my boots!
Yes, my lord. At once, my lord. Only, we received word that the bootmaker has some trouble replacing the exact material that was previously on the underside of the boot.
Yes, but she said the same thing 4 weeks ago. I understand that boots like mine are quite a rarity, but for goodness sake, every lord and lady between here and the spike fields must have boots like mine.
Well, no, unfortunately not, my lord, as you had them all killed last week.
All the better for taking their boots off their rotten little feet then.
Ah, but you ordered the corpses burned, my lord.
No. I said they should burn for eternity. I was referring to the afterlife. Are you telling me not one overly familiar captain thought to themselves, well, I could certainly use some boots like those before they dumped the corpse on the pyre?
It's a possibility, I admit, my lord, but if I may be so bold, how did the boots become damaged in the first place? Perhaps we should remedy the circumstances before replacing the clothing.
It's very simple, really. If I'm walking along my wall and I see one of those scaly insects that so love the volcanic rock out of which we have constructed this fortification, I'm inclined to squish it beneath my foot. Very sharp those insects are, though, and so every so often I am prone to damaging my boot on the underside. What I cannot understand is how the finest bootmaker on this side of the coast cannot remedy a simple case of boot soul shatter. Soul shatter, that's the joke. Get budgeted!
You said the thing.
I said the thing.
He said the thing.
I said the thing.
That was that's very Auntie Donna humor that you put out there. That's the joke.
That's the joke. That's the joke. If you enjoy when I say that's the joke, you can see those every Thursday in the Greensboro Commander Community Discord server, which is where we hang out with our playgroup. There's a 50 Thursdays channel in there where I release these in text form.
And you can discuss the law,
Yeah.
if there is any,
Like that we now know that the Cald Merchant is probably queer.
and a communist.
Yeah, well, that we've known for a while, I will
True.
say. Anyway, we're talking about high power cards. I tried, by
Yeah.
the way, to include.
I think that's a
high powered. Yeah,
It's a great card.
It's the kind of rate that you can expect to aim for in high powered.
It's also the fact that it's instant. Like it's
Yeah.
something that even if you get to the end step before your turn, if there's not been anything else to use with your mana, having an opponent sack something for like 1 mana per opponent is pretty good. And
it's
usually,
a 3-for-1, right?
And usually the highest powered CMC or the highest mana value is usually the biggest threat that you want to remove.
Well, I will say that in a lot of high-powered commander, usually the highest mana value thing, a lot of the time, is the commander. So paying 3 mana to remove the commander is very, very good.
It's a big 3-for-1, for sure.
Big time.
Look, we are going to continue talking about building high-powered casual, but now I want to move specifically into the essentials. We were talking about conditional cards just a second ago. For us, it was like 10 minutes ago, but for listeners, it was just a
moment ago.
We were talking about conditional cards, things that need other circumstances to be good. And I want to talk about this in regards to card draw and removal.
Sure.
Because I do think when we're building decks, especially me and you, we find a lot of really fun synergies with card draw and with removal that work for our commander.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about cards like Greater Good, for example. This needs a big creature to sacrifice to make this really good.
But if you have big creatures in your deck, or your deck that is focused on making creatures very big with +1 counters, that kind of thing, this is an instant speed card draw outlet whenever anybody removes any of your stuff. And if you care about filling the graveyard as well, because you have to discard 3 cards, holy cow, drawing 8 and then discarding 3 of your creatures to reanimate later, that feels great.
It's really, really strong. However, it needs that big creature.
Yes.
And so you need to be able to guarantee in your high-powered casual deck that you can always have a big creature to sack. Otherwise, it's a 4 mana could draw you a card.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
You need to be very heavily into any individual strategy before these synergy pieces, in terms of your essentials, like your card draw, like your removal, become good. Like, you know, if you're playing Plumb the Forbidden, this is the 1 and a black instant, you sack a bunch of creatures, you basically draw cards equal to the number of creatures you sack +1.
And lose a life for each
You
one
lose life for each one, you do, yeah. But it's instant speed, 2 mana. It's a very good rate, but you need to make sure you are going to be able to sacrifice at least 3-4 creatures every time you cast that spell.
To make that card worth running.
Yeah.
All the time. So, like, you need to be heavily in that strategy. I feel like it's the same kind of advice of, like, when you're looking at a card, you need to make sure it's going to be consistent and efficient.
Yeah.
So, like, Plumb the Forbidden... efficiency, if the right circumstances is on board, fucking amazing.
Yeah, big
However,
time.
Consistency, you need to make sure you've got the tokens to sacrifice to it.
Definitely. I think it's the same when we look at removal as well, right? Like, we need our removal to always do the thing. We mentioned Swords to Plowshares, we mentioned Path to Exile.
They always do the thing.
They always do the thing. And I see people playing cards still like Condemn. This is the 1 mana instant.
Prints a lot in precons, I've noticed.
Yeah, it's a 1 mana instant. You put target attacking creature on top of its owner's, on the bottom of its own library.
Yeah.
And they gain life equal to its power.
I think they just gain 4 life, maybe.
Okay, anyway.
I can't remember if there is life gain stable to it.
Yeah,
But
it is 1 mana instant that, like, gets rid of the thing, but the creature has to be attacking. And as we're getting towards higher powered games where combos might be more common, just
alternative win cons in general.
Yeah, combat is, like, still going to be a valid thing, but it's not going to be the only thing the way that it is in sort of mid to low power.
Where, you're always wanting to attack because pretty much all those games at that power level end with a swing.
And even in those games, I would say Condemn is not always that good. Because, like, if someone's commander is gonna... If you can't see a attack with your commander that doesn't kill it, most people, even in low-powered games, just don't attack with it, right?
What if I want to kill a Rami of the Dead Tide?
Yeah, I'm never attacking with a Rami. It's got a tap-activated ability.
It's never attacking, so I'd never be able to use Condemn to remove.
Yeah.
Same thing with, like, so that's a condition that needs to be met.
Yes.
Same thing with, like, Kabira Takedown. This is the MDFC.
It's a land on the back.
Which we love.
We do love.
We run it in a lot of our, like, go-wide token strategies. But it needs the tokens to be good because the card says the Kabira Takedown deals damage equal to a target creature equal to the number of creatures you control.
Yeah, so if you've got 10 creatures, this is a 1 and a white, deal 10 to something. That's awesome.
It's really fun.
But if you've got 1 creature or 2 creatures, 2 mana shock... Not so good.
Yeah.
Not where you want to be, even in white.
So I think that the lesson with card draw and removal is use the staples.
Yeah.
Because, like, specifically with these 2 categories, there are just amazing staples.
Oh, yeah. Even in white these days. Like, we have Mangara the Diplomat. We have Trouble in Pairs.
Esper Sentinel.
Esper Sentinel. We even have, like, the stuff like Takaji is welcome.
Oh, yeah.
It cares about small creatures entering the battlefield.
Welcoming Vampire is also a staple.
Like there are so many valid pieces of card draw in white these days that you don't necessarily need to rely on really narrow and particular things, and certainly in removal. God, Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile, neither of those are above about $5. Swords is about $1.50, I think, at the moment.
Yeah.
And then there's even beyond that level, like there's that recent one from Outlaws of Thunder Junction that I'm eyeing for a lot of my budget decks. For 1 and a white, it destroys an artifact or creature, they make an Ox.
Is this Bovine Intervention?
Bovine Intervention.
I love this card, yeah.
Great flavor as well.
Yeah.
But like that is a totally reasonable rate.
Yeah.
It always gets rid of something. You can hit creatures, you can hit artifacts. It leaves them with an irrelevant body. Like that is still so much more consistent than Condemned.
Just even like, the black 2-mana removal suite, like Infernal Grasp or Go for the Throw. Just like stuff like that is just always going to be removing something. Unless it gets counterspelled.
Yeah.
It's doing it.
Yeah.
However, like if you cast a Kabira Takedown and someone doesn't have a counterspell, but they have an instant speed, deal 1 damage to all your tokens, that's a shit card.
Yeah.
Like,
we're just really chasing these cards that will pretty much always perform.
Yeah.
Outside of, being countered, which you can never account for.
and look to the colors that you're in as well. Like, if you are in blue and you have the means to play cards like Rhystic Study or just like, other really, really good card draw permanents or, like if you got like a, Teferi in your deck that can uptick every turn and just filter through your deck.
Yeah.
Run those cards. Don't look at your Azorius deck and go, I'll find the weird synergistic life gain card draw. No, you want to be drawing cards and it cannot be conditional.
Yeah. Well, as little as you possibly can,
Yes.
I would say. Definitely.
I think the thing that you need to be looking at, so like, for example, we talked about Greater Good. You'd mentioned that like synergy of like, sacking something, drawing a bunch of cards, and then discarding 3 creatures for reanimation later. Yeah. If your deck is looking to do that anyway, run Greater Good.
Yeah.
And like, if you're in a Merrin deck, for example, you could probably run Greater Good.
Oh, Merrin is... Greater Good is in my Merrin deck, and it is busted
It is so strong, especially in yours, because yours is a Power Matters Greater Good Merrin deck.
Yeah.
So if you can really leverage it, then you can start using it.
To be honest, it's not dissimilar to the argument we were making for the 6 and 7 mana spells, where it's like, if they are that impactful, then yes, you can go against this general advice, but most of the time, chase the cards that are just consistent every time.
Yeah. And let's look at interaction.
Sure.
Now. So like, and this also looks at stopping your opponents from winning as well. So look, you should be running the top tier stuff. And I would also say that you want a higher number of interaction pieces than usual
for
in
high-powered
high-powered casual.
Big time.
Because your opponents are also playing high-powered casual decks, and they are going to make plays that are very, very relevant to the game. Sometimes someone in a like low-powered casual game will play something out, and you'll be like, could remove it, but I'll probably sandbag this for later when I need to remove something.
I've won games of like lowish powered casual where I have personally only cast like 2 removal spells the whole game. You can't do that with high powered casual games. You need to be, I mean, our recommendation for targeted removal was about the 7. I think we said you could go high to about 10.
Yeah.
I think high-powered casual, you could even be around the 15 mark, just to be safe.
I think it's 10 minimum.
I would say
my
so.
advice. Is 10 minimum pieces of interaction. And you're running the really efficient, really low mana interaction pieces. So like your Swords to Plowshares, your Pongifies, even like looking at Toxic Deluge as your board wipe because it's so low mana means then you can rebuild afterwards quickly.
You could be starting to look to free spells here. You might be a deck that plays Fierce Guardianship, or at the very least maybe a Flawless Maneuver, even the Black Exile spell.
The Deadly Rollick.
Deadly Rollick, like you can be a deck that now wants to use these extremely efficient spells.
I will put a little bit of a caveat on that of making sure you're not just like, if you're in blue, God, you've got access to so many free interaction pieces in blue.
Again, we're still in casual, so be careful of not overdoing it.
And like, because if you just include all of them, you're probably moving towards a cEDH deck list. Anyway,
that makes sense.
The other thing that I would like say here is with how important lots of interaction is for these play groups is if you don't have them, and if you're all playing really high-powered decks without the interaction, what you end up doing is sitting down with 3 of your friends and goldfishing your decks until someone wins.
I have personally found when I'm watching gameplay, there's a couple of game shows gameplay shows out there on YouTube that I think sit in basically exactly what you described.
Yeah.
Very efficient win cons, very efficient card draw, not very much removal. I find them, to me, the most boring games of Commander that I've ever watched. I imagine it might be...
And to play in,
I
too.
think to play in it would still be boring. I just think like that the whole appeal of this higher part of the power level spectrum to me, and even with cEDH, is the interaction. It's the complexity of the stack and stuff. And it's like, if we're just playing the most powerful cards and nobody's ever stopping each other, then yeah, it does just feel like goldfishing with 3 other people at your table. I don't think that's very fun.
No. And like in the same category, if you know that you're going to be playing in super high powered casual, you're going to need the protection to back it up.
Oh, yeah.
So now we're looking at cards like Teferi's Protection as one of our protection spells. Like,
yeah, you might even be looking at like Clever Concealment. This is the one that has Convoke, but you phase out any number of creatures you control. But yeah, this is basically a free spell effectively in the right decks. But yeah, a free way to survive a board wipe might just win you the game in these kinds of pods.
Yeah, stuff like even Heroic Intervention is still really, really good in high-powered casual because
Very
it's
efficient.
2 mana, hexproof, and indestructible.
Yeah.
If it basically counterspells a removal spell, and it makes you win if someone casts a board wipe.
Yeah.
Like, it's really strong.
It beats anything except a farewell, usually.
Lastly, in this category, and this is the tricky bit because, again, we're still in casual, not in cEDH, stacks.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not going to give out a lot of advice on this because it is so interpersonal and it's so important to have the conversation with your playgroup and with other people. If you want to build a stacks deck, go for it, but make sure you are doing the rule zero that we'll talk about later to make sure that you are playing in a group that is happy to play with that.
I feel like the place that I see stacks in these pods where it's the most welcome is not necessarily stacks decks. I think still in these kind of power levels, they're usually not welcome, though it depends again on your playgroup.
Yeah.
I think you will start to see, though, people start to play specific stacks pieces.
Maybe even like a Drannith Magistrate.
Maybe. But even stuff like Grafdigger's Cage. I'm a big fan of Weathered Runestone. I think this is a very fair... This is from Kaldheim. It doesn't see much play because it's not like the best of stacks pieces, and so you don't see it really in like high, like cEDH, you don't see it in at all. But I think in high-powered casual, it's totally valid. It's 2-mana artifact, non-land permanent cards in graveyards and libraries can't enter the battlefield.
Ooh.
Players can't cast spells from graveyards or libraries.
Oh, it's like a mini Grafdigger's Cage.
It's a mini Grafdigger's Cage. It's not quite as oppressive as Grafdigger's Cage, but it kind of just goes, let's slow that down a little bit, folks.
I also think even like some tax effects in high-powered casual, like Smothering Tithe will appear a lot more.
Lodestone Golem,
even that kind of stuff. Like just slowing your opponents down if you are a deck that does want to do that, then that's fine, but you need to make sure it's right for your play group. Yeah. Again, we're not in cEDH, so you're not going to be able to sit down at any table here and just be able to play your, Grand Arbiter Augustine deck.
Oh, big time. And in the same way that when we were describing the high-powered, how it's sort of this wide band of this section of the power level scale, I think the higher section of that is more amenable to stacks. The lower section might not want stacks at all.
Yeah, you might even get to a point where you're playing with high-powered groups that love land destruction.
Yeah,
there are casual Commander players out there that go, yeah, you know what? I don't mind an Obliterate in my deck.
Yeah. The thing is, this section of the power level scale is kind of a Wild West a bit.
Yeah.
cEDH at least has the meta and has the mindset to fall back on. High-powered, you can see basically anything be played.
It's like the Wastelands in Fallout. It's really messed up out there.
Someone just watched the Fallout show, and
I'm
it's
obsessed.
Not me.
Honestly, we played the Fallout decks on stream, and then that show came out, and I was like, oh, it's so good.
It's fate. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about win conditions now, because this is probably like what defines what differentiates the mid-powered casual decks to high-powered.
Yeah.
Because I think the win cons in high-powered casual, if not a combo instant win, should be very linear.
Oh, big time. I think this is when we start to see people deploy stuff like Impact Tremors and win that turn.
Yes.
That kind of thing. Like, it's like
Impact Tremors in your Locust God deck and then cast 2. Were you thinking of that?
I was literally about to say that. Big time.
Windfall and then another wheel and just
it's like,
win that turn.
I have 21 creatures enter the battlefield, you're all on 21, you lose.
Yeah. I also think that like the turn in which they're deployed is usually a lot earlier in the game.
Big time.
I'm thinking... I'd say around turn 7 to 9 is a high-powered casual deck.
I'd say especially with a combo. I think in lower-powered pods, combos do get seen, but they're more like turns 11 or 12.
Yeah.
If you see them. And again, most of the time, you won't see them at all.
No. And I think that even if it's not a combo, a high-powered casual deck could win on turn 9.
Yeah, it's feasible. It's
Yeah.
like it's the kind of thing. I mean, we talk a lot about ceilings and floors with decks, right?
Yeah.
I think that high-powered casual decks are ones where the ceiling might be a turn 7 win or a turn 8 win. Where I think if I looked at my decks, like the soonest I could conceive of one of my decks winning, a lot of my mid to low powered,
10?
it's turn 10.
Yeah.
Like at the earliest, that's like the dream.
Yeah, I was even thinking of some of like your really powerful decks, and I was like, no, because you'd need to ramp into it, and that would take at least 3 turns.
Very specific sequences of cards. Like I have an Impact Tremors in my Goblin deck that has Krenko Mob Boss in it.
Oh, that
so it's
could...
like that can do it
Yeah.
sometimes. If you just like untap with Krenko twice with an Impact Tremors, it usually just wins the game.
Yeah. I also think that the win con needs to take out multiple players.
Yeah.
Ideally, the whole table at once.
Yes.
I think that, like, if you're looking at a combat damage deck, sometimes those decks in mid power will take out one player at a time.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff just ain't going to cut it at high power. Mainly because I think there's this thing in high power where if you take out one player, congrats, you've now got a 2v1.
Yeah,
Like,
you are arch enemy for the rest of this game.
yeah, and
Big
you'll
time.
easily lose from there.
Well,
Like,
again, the interaction pieces are so
Yeah.
good. There's more of them. There's more removal being played. Yeah, you're unlikely to win through that unless you can kill them all at once. I agree.
now, should we talk about the elephant in the room with high power?
Yeah, combo.
Yeah. So look, at this power level, combos are usually fine. Like playgroup discussion required, still talk to your pod,
Yep.
instant win combos, I think there's things that you can do to make this more palatable. So like my level of palatability for combos in high-powered casual is if it requires very specific circumstances.
Sure.
So like if it requires like at least 10 mana available to you, or
Right.
at least 5 non-token creatures, or whatever.
Or you start to see like these kind of loops where you need to have a bounce land on the field or
Yeah.
something. And it's like, okay, if I haven't found a bounce land, it won't be infinite mana kind of stuff.
I've actually got an example for you in a second that includes a bounce land.
Oh, really?
I
Okay.
want to explain that combo because
Cool.
I think I was specifically looking for a combo that you would enjoy playing against because it doesn't win on the spot.
It's a tough ask.
Yeah, but look, there's like other things that make it more palatable. So like
Sure.
if it needs specific circumstances, the first one. I also think that if it doesn't instantly win the game on the spot, that's also fine. The other thing is if it requires permanence that your opponents can see coming. So for
Right.
example, if it's like a intruder alarm thing.
Yeah, people see Intruder Alarm and go like, okay, the likelihood of combo right now has gone up. Decks that didn't have a combo in it might now have an infinite combo because Intruder Alarm is on the battlefield full stop.
Correct. And like they're, being able to see the combo coming instead of it just being like a dual caster twin flame out of
Sure,
nowhere
yeah.
makes it feel a bit more palatable.
I think the number of cards involved has a big involvement
yeah,
here, right?
I was going to say like 3 and up.
Yeah, like two card combos are usually the ones that are the toughest to see coming because it's conceivable someone could deploy both of them in a single turn.
Especially if one's your commander.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're playing a commander that produces more than 1 mana and you're in blue, the likelihood that you see a Pemon's Aura infinite is high, right?
Yes.
And so you kind of know to expect something like that, or Freed from the Real does the
Yeah.
same thing.
So look, I've kind of come up with this combo to see what you think of it.
Okay.
And see, like, it doesn't win the game on the spot, but it's definitely like, whoa, it's
Okay.
going to get you there.
All right.
So your commander's Hullen,
Okay.
Teller of Tales.
Yep.
Whenever you cast a creature spell, you draw a card, put a land from your hand onto the battlefield.
Okay, gotcha.
You've also then got Shrieking Drake.
Oh, well, I see where this is going. This is the 1 mana creature that when it enters the battlefield, you return a creature you control to its owner's hand. I found out when I was building a deck that used bouncing, this is the only example that I'm aware of a creature that can bounce itself to
Yes.
this effect. Everything they've printed since, because of the combo potential, says bounce another.
Correct.
Shrieking Drake, you can bounce back to your hand, so you can keep
So you
on
see
doing
where
it.
we're going already?
I see where we're going.
The way to make it work, all you need is Lotus Cobra and a bounce land.
Let me see if I can stumble my way through this.
Go on, see if
Okay.
you've got all the pieces.
All
Make
right.
it work.
So Lotus Cobra says landfall at a mana of any color.
Yeah.
The bounce land, I'm guessing we're just going to repeatedly bounce to itself. So my guess is we have Hullen, we cast Shrieking Drake, we use the Hullen trigger to drop the bounce land. The Lotus Cobra adds a blue, let's say. The bounce land bounces back to my hand, and then the Shrieking Drake ability resolves, bouncing itself back to my hand. I have a blue, I use it to recast Shrieking Drake.
Correct.
Okay, so what do you just get infinite ETBs?
You get infinite ETBs and infinite LTBs, but Harlan also says draw a card.
Oh,
so you can draw as much of your deck as you want.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
From there, you can win in however you'd like, but you don't actually get infinite mana from this combo. You only get infinite draw.
You're using the blue from the land ETB to cast Shrieking Drake again, so you
Correct.
only ever get that blue back.
Yeah. So
Gotcha.
the win here is like having something like a Laboratory Maniac, so you
Sure.
can close it out that way.
You're not
so
even-
drawing into the Lab Maniac.
Impact Tremors would do it, but you're not in red, so you
Yeah.
actually can't.
It's a weird little combo,
It is a
right?
weird little combo. You could gain infinite life with what's it called? Oh no, not
Soul Attendant?
yeah, something like
Yeah.
that. Although you can't because you have to. Do you have to draw a card with Cullen? I think you do.
You do, yeah.
Well, because in order to drop the land to keep the loop going, you do have to draw the card. 'Cause
Yeah.
It's one line of text. Interesting.
Weird combo, right?
I like it.
I was like trying to figure out one that was like didn't win on the spot, required permanence because like Lotus Cobra is a permanent that's in play.
Yep.
Hullen is a permanent that's in play.
Yep.
And then you've obviously got Shrieking Drake and the bounce land in hand to activate it.
Sure.
There's a few things that need to go right for you to win from there.
Yeah. Interesting.
Cool combo though.
I
right?
like it. I mean,
Yeah.
it just draws your deck. Like there are less egregious ways to draw your deck. So,
sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Look, last thing that I want to talk about with combos. If it's frequently seen in cEDH, take it out.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say if it involves Demonic Consultation, Tainted Pact, or Thassa's Oracle, straight up don't play it.
If it involves Underworld Breach, I'm
Yeah.
actually going to say take it out. Underworld
Yeah.
Breach is just as commonplace as Thassa's Oracle at the moment. So
that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, just it's too close to cEDH if you're running those combos.
Yeah.
Do something weirder like Shrieking Drake and Lotus Cobra.
Well, yeah, I think that's just the thing is like. I do speak a lot about my general kind of
Disdain.
I was trying to find a softer word than disdain, but disdain's probably accurate.
Yeah.
I'm not crazy about combos myself. I think the appeal of high-powered commander as opposed to cEDH is that these kind of fringe-ish weird combos are more valid.
Yeah, I mean, there's like combos that require like 6 cards and win you the game on the spot. If you want to try get that off, like assemble the 5 pieces of Exodia, you go for it.
Totally. And look, I'm not going to lie and say this is something that I'm interested in doing personally, but if I'm playing in a high-powered pod and someone's like, I've got this cooked combo I want to try and get off, I'm like, go for it.
Yeah,
You know,
well, I mean-
this is the place to do that.
I mean, I run the Nest of Scarabs and Yorgmoth combo in my Scorpion God deck, and you're fine sitting against that.
Totally fine sitting against that. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about mana base before we move on into actually playing.
Sure.
Look, fast mana pieces are okay, I think. Don't run all of them because then you get too close to cEDH again.
Yep, that's fair.
Tap lands, shit. Like,
Yeah.
actually shit now. Like,
It's
you want to
so
be...
important that you have early plays
Yeah.
that tap lands are really going to slow you down.
Yeah, I think also, like, there's, like, a room for some tap lands only if they're doing something really busted in your deck. For example,
Sure.
like, Axe Guard Armory in Equipment and Aura decks.
Sure.
It's just another tutor in your deck.
Yep,
Which
5
makes your
mana.
deck more efficient.
Yeah, definitely. I also think that you can afford to have tapped lands that are fetchable in this. I mean, you're probably around a power level where you'll start to see fetch lands.
Yes.
And if you have them in your deck, then yeah, your triomes are going to be valid. The new Surveil lands are going to be valid tap lands. Like these are if you're going to have tapped lands, you want them to be fetchable, I think, at this power level.
For sure. Typed lands.
Yes.
Speaking of tutoring, though, tutors in high-powered casual...
It's going to be a big one.
This is that consistency word, right? This is where we really increase the consistency.
Yeah.
But again, I'm going to warn, don't just run a ton of tutors. You're still going to want to rely on card draw for that variance that we enjoy in casual commander. We are still looking for that, especially if you're in black. If you just run all of those unconditional demonic tutor style effects, you just have too many.
I think, yeah.
I would argue that running conditional tutors, as opposed to the argument we were making before around like don't run
play conditional
card
cards,
draw.
but conditional tutors. So your Open the Armories, your Fabricates, your Mystical Tutors that fetch one card type.
Yes, a specific thing. As long as your deck is in that thing, like if you're in an artifact build, Fabricate would probably get anything you want, but it doesn't get anything you want. Do you know what I mean? There's a difference between anything you want and anything you want.
Fabricate doesn't fetch you a board wipe.
No.
Oh, and very rarely, unless you're
It
playing.
gets an O-Stone.
It gets an O-Stone. Funnily enough, it gets Boom Pile.
But we're not
No,
playing
we're not
Boom
playing
Pile.
Boom Pile. But yeah, I think that this is probably the kind of thing, like, tutors do increase the consistency of your deck, and I think maybe the weirder your win cons and synergy pieces are, like, I'm saying the lower in power, I think the more tutors you should play if you're sort of trying to balance out. Like, tutors will just naturally drag the consistency higher, which drags the deck's power higher.
If you've got like a glass cannon that is very delicate to assemble, you can make that glass cannon more effective to fire with tutors.
If 5 or 6 tutors might be right in a deck like that. I think probably at this power level, most decks are going to want 1 or 2. But yeah, I would say try and steer away from the black unconditional ones if you can. It's also boring. I'll say, like, when you play it, it gets repetitive, winning and interacting exactly the same way every time.
We've said that in, like, when we talk about mid power, but even in this high power casual deck, we do want some level of variance, and tutors is probably the thing that's the hardest to walk, to find the fun of the variance, but also making your deck really hyper efficient.
Yeah, I would say this is probably something you can play test around with, where you could try going higher, and if you start getting bored, cut some tutors. If you start going really low on tutors and then you're finding your deck's not consistent enough, add a few more. Like, this is something you could play around with for finding your playgroup's specific sweet spot.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
All right, let's finish off this episode by talking about how to actually play and pilot in high powered.
Oh yeah, we've been talking about building your deck the whole time.
Yeah, which is a kind of a fair thing to do, because it's the big crux of it. But
definitely,
I think it's important to identify that there is some really key differences with playing high powered as opposed to playing other casual.
Definitely.
I think the first thing that I want to really highlight is that you need experience. And experience in Commander in general, like, you know, you need to understand a lot more rules for high-powered casual, mainly because combos are going to come up.
Yeah.
There are going to be things that layers are going to come up.
I think if the stack starts getting hectic, you need to know what things are triggers and what things are replacement effects. Like, and stuff also, like that's going to be really important.
Yeah, when you get priority and stuff like that.
Big time.
Go do your research before you sit down in a high-powered pod. Make sure that you're aware of these rules. We've got episodes on all of these topics, so go check it out.
And likewise, I think, like, you need to understand the rules of your deck and the way that your deck works, right? I think this is the kind of power level where you need to, like, at the very least, look up your commander on Scryfall, scroll down to that rulings bit, and really understand, okay, what is my commander affecting and what is it not? So, like, for instance, when I built my Gandalf, the white deck, I'm not saying it's a high-powered deck, but I am aware...
move in that direction, though.
I could see it. It's conceivable. But I was aware that this is a pretty complicated thing that it's doing, and so I read all the rulings to be like, okay, what is doubled by Gandalf and what is not? I really need to get this. And I asked about 4 different judge rulings in our judge channel of our Discord server.
It was funny. When you were building that deck, I knew what you were building, but everyone else was like, what the fuck is Walt doing? Like,
you need to do this, I think, anyway. It's a good habit to get into, but especially high-powered, you need to understand your deck, definitely.
For sure. And I think the best way to do that is, like, once you've built the deck, goldfish the shit out of that thing. I think that your experience with your deck, in the same way that you need to really know your deck better than anyone else at the table in cEDH, same goes for this high-powered casual. You need to be able to kind of surprise your opponents with what it can do. Find out the lines that, you know, because you want to be able to see... I mean, this is actually a really good opportunity for you to see on what turn your deck wants to win.
Oh, sure.
If you're gold fishing. I think, like, especially, you know, gold fishing with no interruption, like, you know, pretending that things just don't get removed. What turn does your deck want to win on?
I think that's the best way to goldfish, to be honest. I think it's so difficult to ever quantify when a board wipe is going to get cast, when a removal spell is going to get cast, that you should just goldfish the first 6 turns of your deck and then just be like, okay, best case scenario, what's going to happen? Because if you're playing high-powered casual and you're goldfishing your deck, and even with no interaction, it gets to turn 10 and you're not remotely close to a win, you need to improve the consistency and power of that deck because it's not going to be good enough.
It's not ready for that table.
No.
And keep in mind, obviously, because we're higher on our own interaction in our deck, goldfishing can be a bit challenging.
Sure.
Just because you're going to have maybe a hand with 3 interaction pieces and you don't know if you'll use them or not.
Definitely.
So it's a skill. We might even visit that in an episode at some point.
I'd say so. In the meantime, I do think that Command Zone's recent episode on goldfishing...
Josh Lequire and Rachel did it.
They did it.
Great.
It was so good because they spent the first half talking about why you goldfish and what you should look at. They spent the second half just goldfishing live and being like, this is what I'm looking at. This is how I'm looking at approaching my deck. This is what changes I would make. It was a really, really great episode.
Yeah.
Highly recommend.
All right. And finally, we've been alluring to it for the whole episode, but the Rule Zero discussion.
Yes.
When you sit down at that table, you should still have one. And I think even more so if you are the guy that wants to play high-powered and you're going into an untrusted pod.
Oh, sure. This is the phrase that we hear the rules committee use. So the untrusted pod is like, okay, I'm at a game store, I'm playing with people I haven't met before.
Or a convention or something like that.
Basically, it's just people you don't know or people who don't know your decks. It's really, really important that you're playing in a higher power, so more strategies will be accepted in that power, but that doesn't mean all strategies will. And like we said, people's approaches to high power will be really different.
It's the Wild West out there, like Walt said. I think the things that you need to be saying in these Rule Zero conversations as well is stuff like be prepared to be blown out or locked out or even controlled. Like if you're running a, Worst Fears or a Mindslaver and you're looping that, like you want to highlight that to the table so they're ready for whatever is about to happen.
People have really different definitions of what they consider high power to be. So it's going to be really important that you articulate what you mean by high power because there will be people who will sit down with you and be like, yeah, this deck is busted. If they've been playing Commander for a year, they might just be playing with all their friends who have precons and their deck just happens to win all the time and they're like, yeah, this deck's high powered. They might not understand what high-powered really means to you.
Yes.
And so you need to start by being really clear so they can be like, oh, I thought high-powered was when I have an overrun.
Yeah. You need to, you need to explain the intricacies of the deck, especially if there's combos, right? So you want to be able to explain the ruling on how it works so your opponent, who might never have been able to see that combo played out before, understands how they can potentially interact with it while it's happening.
Definitely.
Look, I think the final thing that I want to leave on is when you're playing, like actually sat in the game now, like you've experienced your deck, you've goldfished it, you've done the Rule Zero, now you're mid game, you've got 5 lands on the battlefield, let's go. What kind of mind state do you need to have? I actually think that you should bring that cEDH mindset to these pods.
Yeah.
Once you're playing.
Yeah. You need to think of it like you kind of need that. I don't know. It's like that competitive drive. Even if you don't play cEDH, bring kind of the mindset you have when you play limited, when you play standard. You're
wanting to win.
Yeah, it's this mindset of going like, okay, what are my outs? And like, I love looking at my hand and going like, this is kind of fun. I'm going to play Millennium Calendar.
Yeah.
I love doing that, but this is not that mindset. This is the mindset of going like, okay, I can't win right now. I know I'm going to lose to James on his next turn.
My goal should be stopping James.
I need to dig for a board wipe.
Yeah.
I know how much my board wipe costs. I know it's a Wrath of God. I have 7 mana. I'm going to use this 3-mana card draw spell in my hand because my only out is Wrath of God and I need 4 mana to cast Wrath of God. Like, this is just that level of thinking and that competitive drive that you need to have in these pods, I think. Or you get the most out of them if you have this mindset.
And to be honest, it's really good for you as a Commander player in general because like you've done the good stuff. You've done the Rule Zero conversation. Everyone's aware of it. Now take the gloves off. Like once you've given your opponents the rundown of how that combo works, you shouldn't feel bad in these pods to play out that combo. No. Because you've highlighted it. You've said, this is in my deck. This is how it works. This is how you can stop it. I'm going to take the gloves off now. And if I connect, you're getting knocked out.
Well, also, I think that people will threat assess much more fairly, I think, or not even fairly. Like they'll threat assess correctly. I think
threat assessment is much more crucial in these high power pods.
It is, and I think what it'll mean is that if you are the person who's in the lead, you will become arch enemy, and that is the right thing for the pod at that time. And so, likewise, when you're threat assessing other people, think about which deck is going to use its life total when you're deciding who to attack. For instance,
did someone just shooter?
Yeah. How many cards in hand do you have, Brad? Like,
how much mana have you got available to you right now?
Yeah.
This is the stuff that we actually spoke about a lot in our Noticing Absence episode. So if you want to get better at that skill, go check out that episode. But this is the kind of stuff that you got to be thinking about. Optimizing your play, choosing which sequence to deploy things in the right order. Not rolling a dice to select who to attack.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
You've got to really do it in the way that is the most efficient and the most directed towards you winning, for sure.
And finally, politics.
Yeah.
Politic to your own benefit all the time.
Yeah.
Do not play politics like you are in low powered where it's like, oh, let's be friends for the next 5 turns. Well, no, it's like, we need to deal with this problem. You deal with it. I'll give you this one thing in return.
Yeah.
And once that's gone, it's not like you don't hold a grudge. You don't hold an offer like a I owe you or thing. You politic to your outs.
And you don't accept deals that don't benefit you. So when someone does strike you a deal, like this is especially the power level where if someone strikes a deal and you're like, I don't think this is where I need to be right now, you have full authority to be like, I'm not going to take that deal.
Yeah. Look, power levels are hard to balance in Commander, but sometimes you got to bring out the big guns. But you still want everyone to have fun. It's a fine line between laser tag, paintball, and actual warfare. But with some careful card selection, you can play a casual game of Commander with some very powerful cards, powerful plays, and everyone in the pod will have some high-powered fun. So, Space Commanders, command received! Ooh, high-powered.
I know. It's like, it's fun to talk about. And it's not something we've talked about very often.
It's something that we tend to point people away from, but I personally play quite a lot of it, and I really, really enjoy it. Like, my power level of decks is so wide, man. Like, it goes all the way from, like, janky, weird, terrible deck, like my Ninth Doctor deck, to, like, my Scarab God with tutors, graveyard tutors, a few combos, to cEDH, to in between where, like, Tornos lives, and it's a weird power spectrum. I love all aspects of Commander.
Yeah, it's funny. I own currently about twice as many Commander decks as you, but I would
All
say
of them sit with the same power level.
I have like my cEDH deck, and then everything else is like the mid to the very, very low. Anyway, to you listeners out there, do you feel commanded? What do you think of high-powered casual? And what's your deck of choice when you play at a pod like this?
Yeah, and if you play against us, what are you bringing for the big guns?
Yeah,
tell us that.
Bring it.
You can tell us on all the social platforms of your choice at Get Commanded everywhere, or the best place to talk to us is live on our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/getcommanded, where we are now streaming once every week on Monday at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And if you can't join us live, you can always watch it 1 week later on the YouTube channel.
You absolutely can. And the first best way to support the Get Commanded podcast, as we talked about before, is over on Patreon. It's linked in the show notes. It's the absolute best way to support what we do, and it is the reason that we're continuing to add and refine the things that we do and add more cool stuff for all of you. So we'd like to thank our patrons Fuzzy, Bottomless Potamus, and Dyer, and an extra special shout out to Fletcher Cutting and Wizard Down Under, who support us in the Space Commander tier. You're the best.
You are the best. And also Palms Off Gaming, you're pretty sweet too.
It's true.
These guys are the sponsors of our podcast. These guys create awesome deck box sleeves, binders, and other gaming accessories. You can check them out at palmsoffgaming.com.au /#GetCommanded to get 10% off your purchase, which is pretty big, to be fair.
Yeah.
Lots of sleeves can be bought. You get like 10 sleeves for free. How cool is that? So you can go to palmsoffgaming.com.au /#GetCommanded.
I want to be so clear that there are not 10 bonus sleeves in that pack. James
you just get the discount of 10%. And if you've got 100 sleeves, 10% off.
It makes sense.
It makes sense. You get 10 sleeves for
I just
free.
really don't want to promise people 10 bonus sleeves in the pack. They're not like some Get Command thing where they go like, oh, they use the discount code.
We'll slip 10 more
extra sleeves for you. No, it doesn't work like that.
If you don't use the Get Commanded code, they actually just remove 10 sleeves from your pack.
All the other packs are 90 card slips.
You have to use
They're
Get
actually
Commanded
useless.
code.
You have to use our referral code.
Go to palmsoffgaming.com.au /#GetCommanded to get exactly 100 card sleeves for your Commander deck.
God.
At a reasonable price.
I really hope Palms Off don't get mad at us for that.
Anyway, sorry, Jacob, if you see this.
We love you, Palms Off. We just like being strange little boys. 6'1" little boys. We should play into more.
Yeah, it's your turn this week. What have you been up to?
I have been watching Avatar: The Legend of Korra.
This is the sequel.
The sequel series. I continue to be amazed by how many people have not seen this, despite the popularity of Avatar: The Last Airbender. So, for reference, the Legend of Korra picks up basically with when Aang has lived his full life.
Spoilers.
No.
Okay.
This is the beginning of Legend of Korra.
Right, okay.
Aang has lived his whole life. He's been the Avatar. He's created a sort of world that is definitely much more balanced than the one that we left at the end of Last Airbender.
That's the one with the Fire Nation attack.
Yes. And he's formed this new city that is on the edge of the Earth Kingdom, like across the strait from the Fire Nation, called Republic City.
Right.
And the technology has advanced where there's like cars and
what?
electricity.
Cool.
It's a really, really cool world that they've made.
I haven't actually seen the show, but I've seen what Aang looks like as an adult.
He looks really cool.
He looks so
really hot.
badass.
You look at him and you're kind of like, damn.
Damn, all right.
Damn.
Daddy Aang.
Yeah,
all right.
basically. But yeah, like I think that people need to give this show another shot. I think when people first look, the tough thing to get over is they specifically, and I actually admire them a lot for this, Korra struggles with exactly the opposite of the things that Aang struggled with. So in other words, the things that Aang always had a hold on are the two things that you spend the first 2 seasons with Korra working on. So her first season, she's mastered every element except air.
Interesting.
And she spends the whole first season trying to learn how to airbend. The second season, she has no connection to the spiritual world. And she has to spend the whole season trying to learn about the spirit world, how to be connected to it.
Had, like, seeing visages and
Aang understood spirits because he was raised with the
Air
nomads, right?
Yeah.
That was like a big part of their philosophy. So yeah, like I think it's really interesting.
So it's new and fresh.
It's really different.
Yeah.
And I think when people first watch it, because they're coming from Last Airbender, they're expecting it to be a lot funnier. It's not quite as funny as Last Airbender.
Is it more adult?
It's much more grown up,
Right,
for
sure.
sure. And they're expecting Korra to be more like Aang, who's this child or whatever. Korra's like 20 or like 19 or something. She's mastered 3 elements and she's a badass and she's got no patience. She's like a huge fucking hothead.
Wow.
It's great. It's like such a cool show. And specifically, we've just finished season 2. This is like my 3rd time watching it. Season 3 of Legend of Korra is, to me, better than any individual season of Last Airbender.
Whoa.
I will go on the record. I know it's contentious. People love Last Airbender. The 3rd season of Legend of Korra, the villain, the arc, the subject matter that they look at is so cool. You have to get to this season so
it's
you can
a big
understand.
claim, but I will also say that you say that The Last Jedi is one of your is your favorite Star Wars film of all time.
I actually actively not someone who enjoys having contentious opinions. I'm not one of those like, actually.
I'm different.
Yeah, I'm different and weird. I just like, I don't know. I like stuff that really is adventurous with what it tries to do.
I will say, you have laid out very good reasoning for your opinions on Star Wars and a bunch of other franchises, and I really respect them. I've not watched Legend of Korra yet. I'll watch it and come back to you and we'll duke it out.
If you out there liked Last Airbender, give Legend of Korra a crack. Give it at least the whole of season 1. Like, I know certain people who watched like an episode and were like, "Oh, this is nothing like Last Airbender,"
But
and
go
gave
into
up.
it with the lens of like an adult viewer.
Yeah, be like, okay, this is going to be more grown up.
Because we grew up on Last Airbender. Like, we were kids when we were watching it.
Nothing's ever going to match that expectation. Yeah. And I will say as well that the seasons are shorter. They had less money and less time to make Legend of Korra.
Right.
Sometimes it does show, very sadly. But like when it's good, it is a really great show.
When it's good, it's great.
Yep, that's it. That's all we have time for. So we'll see you next Friday for another transmission from the Space Commanders.
Goodbye, Commander players.